1 inch, it's just an empty title, it can't be true. The man who had spoken earlier smiled modestly, his smile ferocious. However, a hint of a smug look flashed in his eyes. It was precisely because of the existence of the chaotic murder list. Many people who were not afraid of death had wanted to take their lives, so there was naturally no need to think too much about the outcome. Both of them had become nourishment for them, causing their strength to soar. Compared to when the chaotic slaughter rankings had just been released, it had increased by more than double. Clang! As soon as the words left his mouth, the two of them attacked at the same time. 2 seas of blood rolled, and blood-red chains struck out. They were like 2 blood dragons wreaking havoc, carrying a strong fishy smell, causing one to suffocate. The circulation of the origin chi in one's body was actually a little rusty. You want to drink blood? You have really found the wrong person. The corner of Xiaoyan's mouth rose. The flame that covered his body suddenly erupted. 4 monarch flames burned above his head like bright lamps. Countless droplets of blood that gushed out exploded. The bloody smell that permeated the air became increasingly dense. It caused one's head to feel dizzy and dizzy. This entire space seemed to have been corroded. Boom! Xiaoyan's eyes contained a cold glint. He clenched his hand tightly. The blue flame ruler was wide open and the monarch flame on the ruler's surface circulated. As it opened and closed, it completely incinerated the blood fog that surrounded his body. The origin chi within his body howled wildly as it broke through this awkward feeling. Its strength was like that of a dragon as it forcefully scattered the 2 blood-colored chains that were wrapped around it. A metal clanging sound rang out as it collided with the 2 monarch cultivation sovereigns. Clang! Xiaoyan's wrist shook slightly and the blue flame ruler was nearly bounced back. Xiaoyan's eyes focused. Through the thin blood mists, he could clearly see that a human skull had appeared in both of their hands. The skull was grayish-black in color, and it was deeply embedded in the dark black eye sockets. 2 clusters of ghostly fire were circulating around the skull, and the entire skull seemed to have a faint smile on it, causing one to feel a chill run down one's spine. Streams of grayish fog gushed out from the skull, but it was like an indestructible chain that surrounded the 2 of them. The blue flame ruler and the grayish fog collided, and the latter instantly turned into soft cloth. It was actually unable to gain the slightest advantage. Heavenly soldiers? Xiaoyan frowned. Compared to ordinary heavenly weapons, the blue flame ruler definitely had an advantage. However, when faced with the 2 skulls in front of him, it was as if he had fallen into a swamp. Not only was his attack easily neutralized, the blue flame ruler also struck down. It was as if the attack had hit empty air, and there was nowhere to place its power. Woo woo woo, the sound of wailing ghosts and howling ghosts sounded out. Blood flowed out from the eye sockets of the 2 skulls, and a gray fog that looked like steel burst out from them. It rushed towards Xiaoyan from all directions. Wherever the fog passed by, blood and chi would surge into the sky, and the mountains would be sliced off one after another. It seemed as if the entire region had sunk into a pool of blood, and it was difficult to move even a single step. Countless drops of blood were like steel needles piercing towards Xiaoyan. The blue flame ruler protected his entire body tightly. Occasionally, there would be some fishes that escaped the net, but they would also be incinerated into nothingness by the monarch flame. Xiaoyan wasn't in a hurry to attack. The Silver Moon Mountain was huge, and there were places where he could deal with them. As such, he used a strange ability to deal with the 2 of them. On the other hand, he was very curious. Swoosh! Swoosh! The sea of blood carried a terrifying corrosive aura. In just a moment, the blood mist, which had already enveloped half of the Silver Moon Mountain, was enough to easily kill the heavenly beast. It did not do much damage to Xiaoyan. On the other hand, in the Demon Blood King's skull and heavenly weapon, the flames in his eye sockets grew dimmer and dimmer as streams of gray mist swept past. Trembling the valley, Xiaoyan fought and retreated. The blue flame ruler swept across the sky and blocked the attack. The trace of confusion in his eyes finally scattered. The 2 of them held the skull in their hands from beginning to end. There was an endless flow of fresh blood entering the skull from the part where the skull came into contact with his palm. Every time fresh blood flowed into the skull, a frightening light would emit from the eye sockets of the skull. Its power would suddenly increase drastically. In other words, the 2 of them were using their own blood to feed the heavenly soldiers in their hands. If this continues, I will sooner or later play myself to death. After clarifying the function of the skull, Xiao Yan suddenly put away the blue flame ruler. In a flash of lightning and fire, the monarch flame in his palm surged and hit the abdomen of the person in front of him. When the latter saw this, he was not shocked but delighted. The gray fog around his body dissipated slightly, and he collided with Xiao Yan's fist. Dong! Xiao Yan's face was expressionless as he slashed horizontally with his other hand. He cleverly repelled the blood-colored chain that the other person had thrown at him. His fist came to a sudden halt midway as he changed his palm and fingers. The monarch flame at the tip of his finger curled up as he stabbed viciously into the two eye sockets of the skull in the Fey Blood King's hand. Kai! The flames in the eye sockets clashed with the monarch flame and immediately gave off a pungent smell. Waves of intense pain came from the tip of his finger as the skull let out a miserable shriek. Countless gray gases gathered in one spot, wanting to grind Xiao Yan's finger into pieces. Ah! The man in front of him also let out a miserable cry. Both of his eyes were bleeding, and his movements couldn't help but become sluggish. The next moment, a ruthless look flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes. He endured the pain of tens of thousands of ants corroding his fingers. He exerted force with both of his fingers and penetrated the eye sockets of the skull. Crack! The flames in the eye sockets were extinguished in an instant. Following a slight vibration, the skull shattered with a loud bang. The instant it exploded, the blood mist that filled the sky suddenly shrank. Like a rainstorm, they all shot towards Xiao Yan explosively. What came along with this was the man in front of him screaming in pain and the furious roar of another man. Clang! 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 A rain of blood splashed everywhere. Xiao Yan stood in his original spot. As the monarch flame curled around him, the profound martial arts was unleashed to its limit. Layers of rock cracks appeared on his skin. When the drop of blood landed on him, it could only cause the rock cracks to tremble slightly. The source of his cultivation of the profound martial arts was in this Silver Moon Mountain. Using the profound martial arts in this place gave him a strange feeling. The rain of blood scattered across the sky. The land within dozens of miles had turned into a land of death. The ground had been corroded. Looking around, Xiao Yan looked like he was standing in the middle of a desert. Not far away, there was only one man left. Just as he was about to kill his opponent, Xiao Yan raised his brows. Looking at the latter's action, he couldn't help but stop. Woo! The middle-aged man's face turned even paler. His eyes were filled with an incomparably dense blood color. He looked at his dead companion. Not only did he not show any signs of sadness, a strange smile hung on his face. Elder brother, I will avenge you. The smile on the corners of his mouth became increasingly dense. The middle-aged man clenched his 5 fingers in the air. The ghostly fire in his eye sockets became even more turbulent on the skull in his hand. Under Xiao Yan's surprised gaze, the mouth of the skull suddenly opened. A huge shadow of a skeleton appeared, and the skull opened its mouth wide. It swallowed the man who was on the verge of death. In the next moment, an ear-piercing chewing sound was heard. In an instant, an even more violent aura suddenly soared. In the end, it transformed into a huge skeleton door that was empty. It sat behind the middle-aged man. What the hell is this thing? The sound of chewing stopped after a while. Xiao Yan's face changed and he almost wanted to vomit. This should be a skill from the ancient era. It is so vicious. It cannot belong to this era. The Xiaoao's voice was heard, and there was a hint of fear in his voice. This was the first time he had seen such a cultivation technique. The ability it displayed caused his face to turn pale. God Devouring Bone Sect, open. The middle-aged man grinned hideously as he suddenly cut open his palm. He raised his arm high up into the air, and wisps of blood flowed out from his palm and flowed into the skeletal door behind him. It was like a ferocious beast that smelled blood. In the next moment, the huge bone door opened with a loud bang. A figure walked out with big steps. Looking at his face, it was exactly the same as the man who had died earlier. The bone door opened wide, as if a sea of blood had been poured out, and a figure walked out. His limbs were stiff as he walked, and he didn't look human at all. He came back to life again? The Xiaoao cried out in shock. This guy had just been defeated by Xiao Yan, and then he was swallowed by the illusory skeleton. The chewing sound was still echoing in his mind, and now, he was actually standing in front of Xiao Yan alive. No, it's not a real person. Xiao Yan's expression changed. There was some unusual change in his tone. This person, who had walked out of the bone door, did not have the slightest aura flowing around his body. Each and every action of his was quite strenuous. He only slowly recovered after a couple of breaths. Puppet? Xiao Yan's eyes focused slightly when he saw the former's condition. Immediately, he recalled these two words. Immediately, he looked at the middle-aged man in front of him in surprise. The latter's expression was extremely pale. Drops of blood essence dripped into the bone door behind him. Numerous human figures stepped out from within it. 6 figures had actually appeared, and they were arranged in all 4 directions. All 6 of them had stiff expressions on their faces. They looked like corpses that had just been resurrected. None of their chi was leaking out from their bodies. It was as if they were facing 6 stone statues. That thing can turn dead people into puppets? Xiao Yan's eyes were fixed on the huge bone door behind the man. He sucked in a cold breath of air. What was this? In this way, wouldn't there be an endless number of puppets that could be used by him? Compared to the soul demon's so-called borrowing the corpse and returning the soul, it was much more terrifying. Although he had refined puppets before, the materials and procedures that he needed were extremely complicated. If he made a slight mistake, all he would get would be a pile of scrap metal. It wouldn't be as easy as crafting puppets in front of the bone sect. Dong! Before he could finish his thought, under the man's cold shout, the 6 puppets rushed forward stiffly. They threw out 6 fists at the same time. Their chi was heavy and heavy, rubbing against the air and exploding, smashing towards Xiao Yan, who was in the middle. Under the pressure of the chi, Xiao Yan felt suffocated. Swoosh! With a flash, he dodged the attacks of the 6 dummies without any pressure. Seeing the stiff movements of the 6 dummies, Xiao Yan couldn't help but smile. What kind of dummies were these? Not only were their movements stiff, but their reactions couldn't keep up either. Although they were powerful, if they were to fight someone, even an Emperor cultivation warrior would be able to toy with them. Seeing the reaction of the puppet, the man's pale face turned even uglier. A ruthless look flashed across his eyes. He let out a low cry of pain and cut off one of his arms, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The huge bone door behind him seemed to be emitting whimpers, but also seemed to be laughing coldly from the depths of hell. When the door opened, it swallowed the arm of the man, and the sound of chewing could be heard once again. Using one's own body as a sacrifice. This kind of cultivation method is too vicious. Killing 1,000 enemies, self-harming 800. The Xiao Ao's voice rang out. He was also shocked by the man's madness. However, there are some powerful aspects to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been passed down to this day. Xiao Yan said and stopped what he was doing. He looked curiously at the man's every move. Now, he was also interested in this strange cultivation technique. As for the 6 dummies below, they had already sensed their weakness and posed no threat to him. Clang! In the time it took to breathe, the gray fog surged out of the bone door and split into 6 chains of fog, accurately connecting with the 6 puppets. In an instant, the originally dim eyes of the 6 people turned blood red. The sound of bones colliding seemed to be emitted. In the next moment, the 6 of them charged forward explosively. Their imposing manner overflowed into the sky. Their movements did not have the slightest bit of stiffness in stiffness. Boom! 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 The continuous bombardment continued to sweep across the sky. The force was continuous, and the force was heavy. The mountains trembled, and countless spirit beasts screamed as they fled. Looking around, the cracks on the ground were like spiderwebs, completely turning into ruins. Boom! Xiao Yan wanted to test the strength of the dummies, but he did not dodge or dodge. Instead, he forcefully clashed with them. As soon as he made contact with them, both of his arms became slightly numb. The vibration that came from between his thumb and forefinger caused him to involuntarily suck in a breath of air. In a moment of carelessness, he was instantly struck by the critical strikes of the 6 dummies. Ha! Ha ha! Below, the man's face was extremely pale. His remaining palm was holding the skull of the skeleton. The deep eye sockets of the skull were filled with ghost flames, emitting an indescribable light. The huge bone door behind him seemed to be guarding the gates of hell, and a continuous stream of gray fog spread out, completely enveloping the entire world. Awu! Suddenly, a soul-shaking roar sounded out from somewhere, and it was unknown where it had come from. The voice was heavy and strong, like the long howl of a giant beast. It caused the gray fog to scatter quite a bit, causing the man's eardrums to tremble. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and the bone door behind him trembled. It only lasted for a moment before it turned into nothingness. The skull in his hand instantly became dim and dull. The gray fog that permeated the sky also disappeared along with it. Bang! 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 The sound of mountain rocks exploding rang out, and Xiao Yan was sent flying out from the thin gray fog. He coughed out large mouthfuls of blood, and the bones in one of his arms had been broken. His entire body had been seriously injured, and he fell down without any strength left. The Xiao Ao appeared at the right time, and firmly grabbed him before gently landing on the ground. Hiss! The intense pain caused Xiao Yan to suck in a cold breath of air. He looked at the sky in horror. There, the 6 dummies were nowhere to be seen. The surrounding space was distorted, and as the bone door disappeared, all the dummies exploded in an instant, although all of them were only Emperor Cultivation level warriors. The self-destruction of 6 Emperor Cultivation warriors was something that even a heavenly sovereign would have to avoid. Not to mention Xiao Yan. The explosion happened without any warning. No matter how fast Xiao Yan reacted, he wouldn't be able to dodge it in time. He was already very lucky that he was able to withstand the explosion of the 6 dummies without breaking into pieces. This is too terrifying. The Xiao Ao felt a lingering fear in his heart. Both of his hands were trembling. The sudden explosion had shocked him. The situation was circulating rapidly. Xiao Yan was lying on the ground, gasping for breath. He was still too arrogant. Initially, he wanted to see how strong the puppet was, but he didn't expect that he would be nearly killed by it. That guy won't be able to do it either. The Xiao Ao raised its head and looked over. It couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. The man in the distance was lying on the ground. The loss of his blood essence had made him extremely fragile. The beast roar just now had knocked him out completely, causing him to faint. This thing is too strange. However, if it can be used by me, it will be a good thing. After picking up the skull that had fallen to the ground, the Xiao Ao looked at Xiao Yan and said in pleasant surprise. At this moment, the latter was leaning against a broken boulder. His aura was weak, and he was using the situation to recover from his injuries. Although the bones in one of his arms were broken, for the current situation of the technique. However, it wasn't a big deal. Swallowing a corpse of a dead person? I can't do that. Xiao Yan smiled bitterly. When he thought about the chewing sound of the bone door, he felt a chill run down his spine. Although killing people was nothing much, he still felt extremely conflicted in his heart. This was different from refining a puppet himself. Although he was also refining a dead person's corpse, the emotions that he felt were different. Furthermore, after a short exchange of blows, he could also see that this thing wasn't that useful. Not to mention the need to feed it with his own blood essence, the strength of the puppet he refined was only so-so. The only bright point was that as the bone door disappeared, the puppet was caught off guard and exploded, but if the bone door dispersed, it also meant that he would not be able to hold on any longer. At that point, even if he used the self-destruction of the puppet to push back the enemy and consume too much of his blood essence, he wouldn't be able to escape at all. The loss of blood essence. It wasn't something that could be recovered with the help of circumstances. No matter what, this thing was undoubtedly more harmful than beneficial to him. 2 inches by the way, what was that sound? Just as he was about to catch his breath, Xiao Yan suddenly came back to his senses. When he was fighting the 6 dummies earlier, a deep and powerful sound was heard. It was like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, causing his eardrums to ring. After that sound was heard, the 6 dummies exploded with a loud bang. That voice seems to be somewhat familiar. The Xiao Ao carefully recalled the voice. It was somewhat vague and unclear. He seemed to have heard this voice somewhere before, but he was unable to tell what it was. Forget it. This place has caused such a huge commotion. It's very likely that some heavenly beast will be alerted. I should leave this place as soon as I recover from my injuries. Most of the people in Capital of Chaos must have noticed this place as well. If we get entangled with them, we won't be able to leave this place. Xiao Yan's body felt like it was falling apart. He let out a bitter laugh. With his current energy, he had no interest in anything else. After saying that, Xiao Yan moved his body and changed to a more comfortable position to lean against the crushed stones. Under the circulation of the situation skill, the few remaining origin chis in his body surged wildly and healed his injuries. A wave of heat came from his broken arm, and his broken bones were also quickly healing. If it wasn't for the situation skill, he wouldn't have known how many times he would have died. Even if he could rely on the medicine pill to recover his broken bones, it would still take a long time. It wasn't as easy as it was now. In just half an incense stick of time, his arm had more or less recovered its senses. In Mingan Divine Domain, his biggest gain was not only the 1,000 Leaves Ancient Monarch fire, but also the situation skill from Su Chuya. There was also a girl who he truly loved and cared for, who was willing to sacrifice everything for him. This thing was passed down from the ancient era. If I take it back and study it, I might be able to find something. The Xiaoao let out a light snort. It minded its own business as it carefully put away the skull. The skull that had lost the nourishment of its blood essence was no different from an ordinary human's bone. There was not the slightest bit of strangeness to it. This fellow, what should we do? When he saw that the man in the distance was unconscious, the Xiaoao scratched his head and looked at Xiao Yan. The latter said with a somewhat hoarse voice, "In any case, he's on the chaotic slaughter list. Kill him." Those who could appear on the chaotic slaughter list were all people with formidable strength. The Demon Blood King was ranked first, and it had been a long time since the Demon Blood King had run amok in the capital of chaos. The amount of blood that had stained his hands had long since been innumerable. Just looking at the 6 puppets. At least 6 peak Emperor cultivation experts had been killed by the 2 of them. Perhaps the disciples of Yunluo Academy were also killed because of this. Since these 2 men had offended him. It's not his place to be kind. What do you think you are? How could you fail in such an easy task? Serves you right. When he heard Xiao Yan's weak voice, the Xiaoao curled his lips. Previously, he was so nervous that he wanted to die. Now that he saw that Xiao Yan was fine, he felt that this was all the fault of the latter. He could have killed the so-called Demon Blood King, but he had to carry on. Who could he blame? Just as he was about to kill the Fey Blood King, who was ranked number 1 on the chaotic slaughter list, the Xiaoao suddenly fell silent. Then, his eyes moved and he secretly turned his head to look at Xiao Yan, who had closed his eyes to recuperate. A crazy smile suddenly appeared on his lips. It had to be killed anyway. It was unknown how many lives had been taken from this fellow's hands. It would be too comfortable to die just like that. It would not be an exaggeration to kill him with 1,000 cuts. As he thought about this, the Xiaoao secretly took out the skull. Looking at the ordinary skull in his hand, he took a deep breath, and his heart began to beat rapidly. Why not use this fellow to try this thing out? After thinking for a moment, the Xiaoao finally made up its mind. At most, it would be injured and hide inside Xiao Yan's body to rest. As long as the strength of the people in the future was not too excessive, at least no one in the star field would dare to offend them, and it would not be his turn to help. Hiss! His fingertip cut open, and a drop of purple blood dripped onto the skull. As soon as the blood touched it, it was absorbed by the skull, and there wasn't a single trace of it left. He waited quietly for a moment, but there wasn't the slightest change. Strange. Could it be that something's wrong? The Xiaoao was stunned, and its gaze looked towards the eye socket of the skull. It squeezed out another drop of blood and dripped it into it. Wang! When the blood entered the eye socket, a strange flame suddenly rose from the eye socket. The Xiaoao was in a trance, as if it was being stared at by countless vengeful spirits. It was surrounded by countless bones, and the entire sky was filled with white skeletons. Miserable cries continuously sounded out, and it was filled with endless resentment. HMPH. Xiaoao's qi and blood churned. His entire body shook, and a purple light surrounded him. In an instant, he woke up. This illusion technique did not have any effect on him. The eye sockets of the skull in his hand were already surrounded by flames. The Xiaoao's mind moved, and he looked at the skull in front of him. Under his gaze, he could actually see the skull smiling at him. The corner of its mouth gradually rose, as if it had split open. The Xiaoao's mind focused. It stared intently at the skull in its hand. There was already a strange glow surging on it, causing one to tremble with fear. Huff huff. An icy cold wind gently swept across his body. The skull suddenly grabbed the Xiaoao's palm. Traces of fresh blood surged out from the latter's fingertip and was completely swallowed by the skull. Clang! A loud ringing sound appeared. The Xiaoao felt a pain in his head. Immediately, he was shocked to discover that the origin qis within his body were being wildly absorbed by the skull in his hand. The flame within the eye sockets of the skull became even more exuberant. Finally, a gray fog once again surged out from its surroundings. It was just like the cry of a malicious spirit from the depths of hell. An illusionary enormous skeleton slowly appeared. As soon as it appeared, a chilly wind whistled and ghostly wails continuously sounded, as if it was welcoming a supreme king. Crack! The enormous mouth of the skeleton opened wide, and it swallowed the man who had fainted on the ground and was unable to wake up. After that, the sound of bones cracking and chewing resounded in the space, and it caused everyone to tremble. Xiao Yan was awakened by the loud sound and raised his head. He saw the huge skeleton shadow behind the Xiaoao with a glance. He was startled for a moment before he reacted. His facial expression changed. In the end, he did not say anything. Although he hated this kind of cultivation technique from the bottom of his heart, he was not a newbie. After experiencing countless things, he naturally understood many things. Since the Xiaoao was interested, if he could successfully use it. It was also a good thing, as long as he paid attention. It might be a surprise attack. The pain on his arm gradually disappeared. Xiao Yan also became slightly nervous. He stared at every movement of the Xiaoao. If the latter had any problems, he could help in time. Dong! A violent aura surged, and a huge skeletal door slowly appeared behind the Xiaoao. Countless bones were piled up around it, and it seemed as if there was an endless amount of blood and qi being emitted from it. Boom! The huge skeletal door opened, and a human figure stiffly walked out. Looking at its appearance, it was the man who had been devoured earlier. It's done? Xiao Yan rejoiced in his heart. He looked at the Xiaoao in front of him. The latter's eyes were still clear. He involuntarily smiled when he saw this. A thought passed through his mind and this puppet swiftly moved forward. It threw a punch and hit a huge rock that was the size of a person not far from Xiao Yan. In an instant, the huge rock was smashed into pieces. Its power is not bad. That fellow should have just advanced to the monarch cultivation not long ago. This puppet seems to have the strength of an emperor cultivation. If we continue to fight it head-on, it will be enough to exhaust a peak emperor cultivation to death. Xiao Yan smiled and nodded. He had fought with these dummies before, so he naturally knew how powerful their physical strength was. Even he wouldn't dare to fight them in close combat. That's enough. Moreover, the self-destruction of this thing is also a great trump card. The Xiaoao chuckled, and its eyes flickered. This kind of fearless puppet was exactly what he hoped to have. 2. Oh woo! Caught off guard, another long howl was heard. It shook the space, and it rang in the ears of the two men. They were so shocked that their eardrums were ringing, and the sound kept echoing in their ears. Xiao Yan felt stifled in his chest, and he couldn't help but cough violently. The Xiaoao was also startled. It looked in the direction where the sound came from, and its mouth was wide open. It couldn't say anything. There can't be any other heavenly beast in Silver Moon Mountain. The sound should be coming from the dark golden beast. Xiao Yan raised his brows. Most of the injuries in his body had already recovered. Although his arm could not exert much force, the broken bones had already healed. He jumped up and said in a doubtful voice, "What? That's not right. Didn't the dark golden beast only awaken when it was giving birth? It usually sleeps underground. How could the Fey Blood King wake it up with just this bit of skill?" Back when the dark golden beast woke up and gave birth, it had alarmed quite a few people in the capital of chaos. Only a few years had passed. Could it be that the dark golden beast was starting to give birth again? Logically speaking, this kind of heavenly beast that focused on eternal rest would only give birth once every 1,000 years. It was impossible for it to give birth again in such a short period of time. The only explanation was that something unexpected had happened in the Silver Moon Mountain. Even the attack of the monarch cultivation sovereign can't break through its defense. What else can awaken it? Xiao Yan muttered to himself. While he was secretly bewildered, the Xiaoao was stirring something on the side. For some unknown reason, the bone door behind him shook. The puppet that was still standing on the spot was once again sucked into it. Following the closing of the bone door, the enormous illusory skeleton also dissipated, causing the Xiaoao to be stunned. After putting away the skull that had returned to its calm state, the Xiaoao turned its gaze towards Xiao Yan. It chuckled and said, "With your current strength, you might be able to injure the dark golden beast even if you use all of your strength. Why don't you go and collect a few drops of blood essence and strengthen the profound martial arts?" "It can be strengthened?" Xiao Yan was startled. When he had broken through to the monarch cultivation and fought with the spirit of Heartflame, his four-spirit sovereign technique had been enhanced. Although he had only comprehended the first two forms of the profound martial arts, the second form of the Black Tortoise Dragon armor had already reached the level of the high-grade monarch arts. If he wanted to break through again, he would have to find a stronger Black Tortoise bloodline. As for strengthening it, this was the first time he had heard about it. Of course, you were so weak before this. Even if I told you, you wouldn't be able to do anything to the Dark Golden Beast. The Xiaoao pouted and then grinned. When you were cultivating the White Tiger arts, you used the blood essence of the poisonous spirit explosive blood tiger. When you were cultivating the Azure Dragon arts, you used the blood essence of the profound serene dragon snake. These two types of blood essence were the purest in their bodies. Compared to the blood essence of the Dark Golden Beast, they were much purer. Do you know what's different? Hearing this, Xiao Yan mused for a moment. After hesitating for a moment, he said in a soft voice, "The blood essence used to cultivate the profound martial arts was extracted from the blood that splashed out from the Dark Golden Beast's eyes. I was lucky enough to obtain a trace of blood essence from it." Xiao Yan's eyes lit up slightly as he spoke. He seemed to have understood something. "Isn't that right? Blood essence is also divided into purity and impurities. If I can obtain the blood essence within the Dark Golden Beast's body, the profound martial arts will naturally be strengthened by a large step." The Xiaoao laughed, feeling somewhat proud of itself. "Does that mean the vermilion bird technique is the same?" After confirming his guess, Xiao Yan's heart skipped a beat. Then, as if he had thought of something, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The blood essence of the vermilion bird technique came from the feather of the lipid sunbird, so it was likely that the blood essence would be even more impure. "That's right. So, when you have the ability, go to the Deacon sect and slaughter that little bird." Xiaoao narrowed his eyes and smiled maliciously, as if he was enjoying Xiao Yan's speechless expression. "I'm thinking too far now, but I have to go to the Deacon sect in the future." Xiao Yan smiled helplessly and looked into the depths of the Silver Moon Mountain. A trace of confusion flashed across his eyes as he said, "If that's the case, I'll ask for a few drops of blood essence from the Dark Golden Beast." For an old monster that had lived for over 10,000 years, the loss of a few drops of blood essence wasn't a big deal. It would recover after a few hundred years of sleep. Be careful. The awakening of the Dark Golden Beast will probably alarm many people in the capital of chaos. The two of them rushed into the deep mountains. Xiao Yan reminded them. This time, their target was not a single drop of blood on the Dark Golden Beast, but a real drop of blood essence. This meant that they had to at least injure the Dark Golden Beast. Therefore, they had to bear the fury of the Dark Golden Beast. At this time, the others wouldn't just simply watch. There should be quite a number of people who fell to the ground. Why should I be afraid of them? Even the Fey Blood King died. They are now in our hands. In this capital of chaos, besides heaven's surmounting monarch and profound emperor, what else can make us afraid? The Xiaoao snorted disdainfully. Although its tone was arrogant, it was the truth. Xiao Yan smiled helplessly and didn't say anything else. At the same time the two of them moved, several figures had already rushed towards the mountain. Each of them had a shocked expression on their faces. Most of them knew about the news of the Dark Golden Beast giving birth a few years ago. Now, the Silver Moon Mountain had created such a huge commotion once again. The long roar of the Dark Golden Beast could be clearly heard even in the center of the capital of chaos. No one would believe it if there was no unusual change. The Silver Moon Mountain was also rich in Silver Moon iron. This was the reason why the Silver Moon Group had made a fortune. Although the structure of the capital of chaos had changed because of Black Nether Emperor a few years ago, the Silver Moon Group was still as stable as Mount Tai. Many factions were jealous for a long time. Naturally, they would not miss this opportunity. More people flew over from the places where Xiao Yan and the Demon Blood King had fought. Each of them had a look of shock on their faces. The surrounding dozens of miles had been razed to the ground. Such a terrifying battle was likely not something that could be caused by just a few Emperor cultivation warriors. As the corpses of the two had been absorbed by the Bone Sect and turned into puppets, there were no clues left on the scene that could be explored. Those who had witnessed such a scene felt their hearts palpitate. Carrying a complicated feeling, they rushed towards the depths of the Silver Moon Mountain. Inwardly, they were surprised and bewildered. Could it be that there was a monarch cultivation sovereign cultivating in this place? Ow! In the depths of the Silver Moon Mountain, a huge golden tortoise was crazily moving between the mountains. It was precisely the dark golden beast. Its hill-like body was swaying, causing the surrounding mountains to tremble. Its entire body was wrapped in armor, and its head was stretched out. Its eyes were the size of millstones, and they were surging with a crazy blood-red color. It trampled on the ground and rumbled like an earthquake. The dark golden beast is the heavenly beast that has lived for the longest time in the capital of chaos. Now that it has gone crazy and restless, I'm afraid that it has sensed something. Everyone looked at the frenzied dark golden beast from afar. Someone spoke with a worried expression. Although the dark golden beast was only an emperor cultivation level heavenly beast, it was a turtle that had lived for 10,000 years and 1,000 years. Being able to live for such a long time, it might be able to sense the prosperity and decline of the capital of chaos. What's wrong? The Thundercloud clan has such a huge appetite, and they still want to annex the capital of chaos? Someone said with a sneer. Most of them knew what the Thundercloud clan had done in the Star Domain. At this moment, they couldn't help but mock the Thundercloud clan, causing a burst of laughter. The people who came here this time were very different from a few years ago. They were only Emperor cultivation warriors. There were at least a dozen of them as far as the eye could see. Most of them were the leaders of the various factions. The sudden eruption of the dark golden beast had caused even them to be unable to sit still. Everyone was discussing amongst themselves, but none of them dared to step forward to find out what was going on. Although the dark golden beast's strength was only at the Emperor cultivation level, with the help of the unbreakable turtle shell, even if they worked together, they wouldn't be able to harm it. While they were talking, the dark golden beast's huge body was slowly moving. Wherever its body passed, huge cracks appeared on the ground, as if it had been ripped apart. Dust and dust filled the sky, huge rocks flew everywhere, and the earth shook. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. This is a good opportunity. The dark golden beast came out from the ground. There was definitely a rare treasure in the cave where he slept. A loud cry was emitted from the crowd when they saw the dark golden beast move. His voice had yet to fade when it attracted the greed in the eyes of many people. Even if the dark golden beast were to give birth, it would only come out after waking up. It would not take even half a step out of the dormant underground cave. Yet, it was actually willing to leave and expose the entrance to everyone's eyes. Moreover, the Silver Moon Mountain was rich in Silver Moon refined iron. The dark golden beast had slept here for tens of thousands of years. No one would believe that the latter's cave did not contain any treasures. If you don't enter the tiger's den, you won't be able to obtain the tiger's cub. Someone exclaimed in a low voice. He had long been unable to restrain the wild joy in his undergarments, and his figure was like a bolt of lightning as he strode out, charging straight into the underground cave where the dark golden beast was sleeping. Someone took the lead to attack. The others who were still hesitating naturally reacted and rushed up one after another. The dark golden beast was already a distance away from its cave. Although it was almost negligible, compared to the clumsy move of the former, it was not a distance that could be turned around quickly. Ha ha ha! The middle-aged man who was the first to move had already arrived at the entrance of the cave. Seeing that the place where the dark golden beast's ability to sleep was right in front of him, the former could not help but be overjoyed. The origin chi around his body surged and was about to enter the cave. Bang! In the next moment, a millstone-sized boulder exploded from the cave. The middle-aged man didn't even look at it as he punched out. Unexpectedly, the rock shattered, but the latter let out a miserable scream. The bones in his entire arm were shattered, and a huge rock whistled past. It directly smashed him into meat paste. He exploded in midair like a brilliant firework. Fresh blood splattered across the sky, causing those who had followed closely to pause in their footsteps. They looked at the huge rock that streaked across the sky with shock on their faces. What is that thing? Not even an emperor cultivation can break it? Everyone was terrified, and couldn't help but retreat. There were actually other living beings in the depths of the cave. Xiao Yan stood in the middle of the crowd and squinted his eyes. Looking at the huge rock that fell heavily on the ground, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. This thing was actually a huge rock condensed from the Silver Moon essence. Within the thousands of tons of Silver Moon refined iron, only a fingernail-sized Silver Moon essence could be found here, and it was actually the size of a millstone. It wasn't a loss for that emperor cultivation to die because of this. The silver moon essence was a precious material that could be used to craft a heavenly weapon. Its degree of hardness was unimaginable. The dark golden beast used the silver moon essence as food, and there was no doubt that there was a trace of silver moon essence in his blood. However, he didn't expect that there would be pieces of silver moon essence in the cave. Oh right, there should be a small dark golden beast in the cave. We can't do anything about the bigger one. We can pay attention to the smaller one. The Xiao Ao stood beside Xiao Yan. It turned its gaze and suddenly smiled slyly. It whispered into Xiao Yan's ear. This. Xiao Yan's heart skipped a beat, but he remained silent. In all fairness, compared to the dark golden beast, it was easier to obtain blood essence from the little bastard. But if that was the case, wouldn't it be a little unfair? Don't hesitate. For a heavenly beast like the dark golden beast that can live for tens of millions of years, taking 1 or 2 drops of blood essence won't cause any loss at all. The Xiao Ao didn't care at all. The dark golden beast was the descendant of the black tortoise bloodline, and he was the descendant of the azure dragon bloodline. He naturally knew the capabilities of this heavenly beast. All right. After making up his mind, a fiery glint flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes. His eyes swept across the hesitant crowd around him. Starlight flashed under his feet. Before everyone could recover, he had already streaked across the sky like a golden meteor. The Xiao Ao turned into a ball of flame and entered Xiao Yan's body. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yan had already arrived in front of the cave entrance. Is there really someone who isn't afraid of death? Everyone was stunned when they saw Xiao Yan walking forward. They could not help but gloat. On the other side, the dark golden beast seemed to have never heard of all of this. It continued to stomp on the ground crazily. Accompanied by a rumbling sound, it slowly walked into the distance. Looking at its actions, it seemed to be avoiding something terrifying. Boom! Just as it arrived at the entrance of the cave, another huge rock the size of a millstone flew out. It was pointed at Xiao Yan with an incomparably sharp qi, causing the space to buzz. The powerful qi caused Xiao Yan to feel his breathing quicken. Ha! Xiao Yan didn't dodge, he just threw out his right fist. The lone sky fist seemed to have pierced through the space and shattered all the origin qis around him. It collided with the huge rock formed by the essence of the silver moon. In the next moment, the huge rock shattered with a loud bang. Countless broken rocks flew in all directions. Some of the experts who were watching the show were unable to dodge in time and retreated with a wail. Clearly, they had suffered quite a serious injury from being hit by the crushed rocks. Before Xiao Yan could heave a sigh of relief, in the seemingly endless abyss of caves below, a few more boulders were shot out. Their size was much larger than before. Xiao Yan held his breath and focused his mind. His eyes suddenly became sharp. With a wave of his palm, the blue flame ruler opened and closed. It tore through the sky, accompanied by deafening rumbles. All the huge rocks were broken into pieces, falling towards the surroundings and below. When they fell to the ground, they instantly smashed out a deep pit that was like a small hill. Su! After shattering all the huge rocks, there were no more obstructions. Xiao Yan did not hesitate and rushed down into the deep abyss. A cold wind howled by his ears. He didn't know how long he had fallen, but his eyes were burning with flames. Only now did he see his surroundings clearly. The dark golden beast's body was the size of a small mountain. A cave that could accommodate the former was naturally unusual. Even after falling for a long time, it was still bottomless. The black tortoise possesses the ability to control the earth. The dark golden beast is a purebred bloodline of the black tortoise, so it naturally possesses this ability. Otherwise, it would have been able to enter the cave through the traces left behind by the cave after it woke up and went into hibernation the last time. The Xiao Ao's voice sounded beside Xiao Yan's ear, causing the latter to nod slightly. Not long later, his feet finally touched the ground. Xiao Yan involuntarily inhaled a breath of cold air when he lifted his eyes to look. The place he could see was boundless. It was as if the entire underground area of Capital of Chaos had been emptied. If a sun was suspended high in the sky, this place could definitely be called a new city. The mountain rocks on top of his head were thousands of meters high from the ground he had stepped on. It was difficult to imagine that the underground area where the dark golden beast was located would actually be like this. Oh woo! In the distance, a giant beast the size of a small mountain stared at Xiao Yan vigilantly with its huge eyes. Countless millstone-sized boulders were piled up around its body. All of them were actually formed from the essence of the silver moon. Even Xiao Yan had a look in his eyes when he looked at them. What exactly is going on? Why would the dark golden beast leave its nest so crazily? It doesn't even want its child anymore. The little dark golden beast had only been born a few years ago, so it naturally wasn't a big threat. Xiao Yan could clearly see that, but he didn't immediately attack. He looked around, and when he saw that everything was normal, he couldn't help but mutter, "What's going on? Why would the dark golden beast leave its lair so crazily? It doesn't even want a child anymore." Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing sound filled Xiao Yan's mind. When he came back to his senses, his expression suddenly changed. It was as if he had just seen something terrifying, and his legs went weak. He sat down on the ground, baffled. Xiao Yan's face was filled with shock. Even he didn't understand why he was frightened. What was even more unbelievable was that the prestige power spell didn't seem to have any effect on him.